Montana Territory, 1872. The mountains cut jagged silhouettes against the evening sky as Cole Grayson urged his tired horse down the muddy main street of Silver Creek. 6 months since he'd last seen civilization, 6 months of nothing but wind, cattle, and the endless sky for company. That was how he preferred it. The frontier wasn't meant for putting down roots, it was a place of passage, of movement. Attachments only left a man vulnerable, and vulnerability got a man killed out here where law was still more suggestion than reality. At 24, Cole had already seen enough of loss to know better. His father gunned down over a land dispute when Cole was just 16. His mother succumbing to typhoid fever not long after. His younger brother swept away in a river crossing gone wrong 2 summers past. The West took everything eventually. A man survived only by keeping moving, keeping free. He dismounted outside the town's only hotel, a 2-story clapboard building with peeling white paint. His body ached from weeks in the saddle, driving cattle north from Texas. Payment for the herd sat heavy in his pocket, enough to see him through winter, maybe stake a small claim somewhere, not that he'd stay long enough for it to matter. "Fine-looking animal," came a voice as Cole loosened his horse's cinch. The hotel owner, Daniels, if Cole remembered right, stood on the porch, pipe clenched between his teeth. "Gets me where I need to go," Cole replied, patting the Dun's neck. "And where might that be these days?" Cole shrugged. "Wherever the wind blows come spring." Daniels nodded knowingly, heard their hiring hands up at the Lambert place. "Old man can't keep up since his accident." Not looking for steady work, Cole gathered his saddlebags, just a hot bath and a real bed for a few nights. "Suit yourself, town's growing though. Might be worth staying put for once." Cole nodded politely but said nothing. Towns grew, towns died, people came, people went. The only constant was change, and a man who forgot that lesson paid with his heart or his life. After securing his horse at the livery and arranging for a bath, Cole made his way to the hotel's small dining room. The smell of fresh bread and beef stew made his stomach growl, reminding him how long he'd subsisted on coffee and hardtack. The dining room was nearly empty at this late hour, save for an elderly couple in the corner and a young woman seated alone by the window. Cole chose a table with his back to the wall, a habit formed through years on the trail where an unguarded back invited trouble. His gaze drifted to the young woman. Even in the lamplight, he could see she was striking, golden blonde hair pulled into a loose bun at the nape of her neck, a few wayward strands framing a heart-shaped face. Her blue calico dress, though simple, was well-made and suited her slender frame. She couldn't have been more than 20, and something in her posture, spine straight, chin slightly raised, suggested both breeding and determination. She wasn't the type he typically encountered in frontier towns. Most women out here were either hardened by necessity or working girls from the saloon. This one looked like she belonged in a Boston drawing room, not a dusty Montana hotel. Not that it mattered. Cole turned his attention to his stew, focusing on the first decent meal he'd had in months. He wasn't in Silver Creek to make acquaintances. The young woman rose from her table, gathering a small leather portfolio. As she moved toward the door, she fumbled with her gloves and the portfolio slipped from her grasp. Its contents spilled across the wooden floor, papers, letters, and several photographs. Without thinking, Cole rose to help, kneeling to gather the scattered items before other diners could trample them. The woman knelt opposite him, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, voice soft but clear. "How clumsy of me." Cole nodded, reaching for a photograph that had slid near his boot. As he turned it over, his hand froze. The image showed a younger version of himself standing beside his father and brother outside their small Texas homestead. He'd recognize that day anywhere, his 16th birthday, just weeks before his father was killed. His eyes shot up to meet hers. "Where did you get this?" The woman's blue eyes widened slightly at his tone. "I beg your pardon." Cole held up the photograph. "This picture, how did it come to be in your possession?" She looked more closely at the photograph, then back at him, confusion evident in her expression. Then recognition dawned in her eyes. "You're Cole Grayson," she said, not a question but a statement of fact. "How do you know my name?" He kept his voice low, years of caution making him wary of drawing attention. She gathered the last of her papers, standing slowly. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." Cole followed her to a small sitting room off the hotel lobby, his mind racing. The photograph had been one of the few possessions he'd left behind when he'd ridden out of Texas after burying his father. Who was this woman, and how had his family's picture come to be in her hands? Once the sitting room door closed behind them, she turned to face him. "My name is Sophia Lambert," she said. "I believe you knew my brother Thomas." Cole's mind worked to place the name, Thomas Lambert, from San Antonio. She nodded. "Yes, he was a dear friend of your brother James." The connection clicked into place. Thomas Lambert had been his brother's schoolmate, a banker's son who'd sometimes visited their homestead. "That doesn't explain why you have a photograph of my family." Sophia took a deep breath. "When your brother died, his possessions were sent to Thomas. They had been working together surveying land for the railroad." Her fingers traced the edge of the portfolio. "Thomas kept everything, thinking he might one day locate you or your father. He didn't know you'd both moved on." Cole stared at the photograph in his hand, memories he'd worked hard to suppress flooding back. James smiling, their father's hand resting proudly on both their shoulders, the future still bright with possibility. "And Thomas," Cole asked, finally looking up. Sophia's eyes dimmed. "Died last winter. Pneumonia." "I'm sorry for your loss." The words felt inadequate, automatic. "As I am for yours." She gestured to the portfolio. "I found these among his things. I've been trying to return personal effects to the families of those he knew. The railroad brought me this far." Cole handed the photograph back, an uncomfortable feeling settling in his chest. "Keep it. Those people are gone now." "All of them?" Sophia asked quietly. "You're still here." "Not the same person anymore." Cole moved toward the door, suddenly needing air. "Thank you for trying to do right by your brother, Miss Lambert, but there's nothing of my past I need to reclaim." Her voice stopped him as his hand reached for the doorknob. "My father's ranch is north of town. The Bar L. If you change your mind about the photograph or anything else that belonged to your brother, that's where I'll be." Cole nodded without turning around and stepped back into the lobby, eager to put distance between himself and the memories that young woman had unwittingly stirred to life. The hot bath did little to settle Cole's thoughts that night. He lay awake in the narrow hotel bed, staring at the ceiling as his mind churned. The photograph had shaken him more than he cared to admit. For years he'd lived day to day, taking work as it came, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections. It was safer that way for him and for anyone who might make the mistake of counting on him. His brother had counted on him once. James had been crossing that river because Cole had insisted they move the herd that day, despite the spring rains making the water high. Cole had made it across, James hadn't, another name on the long list of people he'd failed to protect. At dawn he rose, no closer to rest than when he'd laid down. The hotel dining room was empty save for a young family passing through on their way to Oregon. Cole took his breakfast quickly, planning to gather his things and move on. Silver Creek had become complicated overnight. As he finished his coffee, the hotel owner approached his table. "Got word from the Lambert place," Daniels said, "offering $20 a month plus room and board for hands to help with fall roundup." "Already told you I'm not looking for steady work," Cole replied. "20's good money," Daniels persisted. "And old man Lambert's got the best spread in the territory, been building it for 15 years. Cole's cup paused halfway to his lips. 15 years. Thereabouts. Came up from Texas with his daughter after his wife passed. Started with nothing, now runs near 1,000 head. His daughter, Cole echoed. Sophia. Daniels nodded. Pretty little thing, ain't she? Smart, too. Keeps the ranch books better than any man could. Shame about her accident, though. Accident. Few years back, horse spooked, threw her bad. Doctors said she might not walk again, but she proved 'em wrong. Daniels shook his head admiringly. Lambert women are made of stern stuff. Cole thought of the straight-backed young woman from the previous night, showing no sign of such an injury. He hadn't noticed a limp or any difficulty in her movements. If anything, she'd carried herself with uncommon grace. Anyway, Daniels continued, offer stands if you're interested. They're sending a wagon for supplies around noon. Cole thanked him and headed outside, telling himself he was just stretching his legs, not purposely timing his walk to coincide with the Lambert wagon's arrival. Yet when a well-maintained freight wagon rolled into town shortly after midday, he found himself watching from the shade of the general store's awning. The driver was a weathered man in his 60s, his face leathered by sun and wind. Beside him sat Sophia Lambert, today dressed in a practical riding skirt and jacket of deep green that complemented her fair coloring. Her golden hair was braided and pinned up beneath a small hat. As the wagon came to a stop, Cole noticed what he'd missed the night before, the careful, measured way she descended, one hand gripping the seat firmly for balance. He approached as the older driver began loading supplies. "Miss Lambert," he said, touching the brim of his hat. Recognition lit her blue eyes. "Mr. Grayson, I didn't expect to see you still in town." "Hadn't planned on it myself," he shifted, uncomfortable with the admission. "I heard your father's looking for hands." Something like surprise crossed her features. "He is, for the roundup and winter feeding. Thought I might inquire about the position, if it's still available." Sophia studied him, and Cole had the disconcerting feeling she was seeing more than he intended to reveal. "It is, though last night you seemed quite determined to keep moving." "Plans change," he said simply. "Indeed they do." A small smile touched her lips. "We leave within the hour if you'd care to ride along." Cole nodded. "I'll get my horse." An hour later, Cole found himself riding alongside the Lambert wagon as it made its way north out of Silver Creek. The older driver, who'd introduced himself as Hank Simmons, had been with the Lambert ranch since its beginning and seemed to consider Sophia something between a daughter and an employer, deferring to her decisions while maintaining a protective watchfulness. "Lambert's a fair man to work for," Hank offered as they crossed a shallow creek. "Demands an honest day's work but treats his hands right." "Good to know," Cole replied, his attention divided between the conversation and the woman sitting silently beside Hank, her profile turned to the mountains rising in the distance. "Miss Sophia runs a tight ship too," Hank continued. "Does the books, orders supplies, even helps with training the horses when her pa lets her." Pride colored his voice. Cole studied her more openly now. "Heard you had an accident, Miss Lambert." She turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "News travels quickly in small towns." "Nature of frontier life," he replied. "Everyone knows everyone's business." "Not everyone's," she said pointedly. "You remain something of a mystery, Mr. Grayson." "Not much to know." "I doubt that very much." Her gaze was direct, challenging. "A man doesn't wander for years without collecting some stories worth telling." "None worth hearing," Cole countered. Hank chuckled. "He's got your number, Miss Sophia, always trying to draw folks' stories out of 'em." "Is that so?" Cole raised an eyebrow at her. A slight flush colored her cheeks. "I find people interesting, their journeys, their reasons." She adjusted her position on the wagon seat, a brief flicker of discomfort crossing her features. "Out here everyone comes from somewhere, running to or from something." "And which are you doing, Miss Lambert, running to or from?" Her eyes met his unflinching. "Neither, I'm exactly where I choose to be." The conviction in her voice surprised him. Most people he'd met on the frontier were there by circumstance, not choice, especially women who often followed fathers or husbands with little say in the matter. "Your father brought you here from Texas, I understand," Cole said. "He did. After my mother died, I was 12. Sophia looked out over the rolling grassland. "It was his dream to build something of his own, away from the constraints of society. I chose to make his dream mine as well." "Even after your accident?" Hank made a small noise of warning, but Sophia waved him off. "Especially after," she said firmly. "I was 18, thought myself invincible. The fall changed my perspective." She turned back to Cole. "We're nearly there. You can see the ranch from the next rise." Cole recognized the deflection but didn't press. As they crested the hill, the Lambert ranch spread before them, a substantial main house of squared timber, several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse. Fields of hay stretched to the east and cattle dotted the grasslands beyond. It was an impressive operation, especially for territory this remote. "Your father built all this in 15 years?" Cole couldn't keep the admiration from his voice. "With help," Sophia acknowledged. "Good hands, good neighbors. And a fair amount of stubborn determination." As they approached the ranch yard, a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair emerged from the main house. Elias Lambert walked with the slight bow-legged gait of a lifelong horseman, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile as he spotted his daughter. "Brought supplies and a new hand, Pa," Sophia called as the wagon rolled to a stop. Lambert's assessing gaze fell on Cole. You have experience with cattle. Yes, sir, drove herds up from Texas, worked ranches in Colorado and Wyoming. Why'd you leave those positions? Cole met the older man's direct gaze. Never intended to stay, I go where work takes me. Lambert nodded slowly. And how long do you intend to stay here, Mr. Grayson? Cole Grayson. He hesitated, aware of Sophia watching him. I can commit through winter at least. Fair enough, Hank will show you the bunkhouse. Lambert turned to help his daughter down from the wagon, his movements gentle but not hovering as she carefully made her way to solid ground. Cole followed Hank to the bunkhouse, a clean, well-built structure with room for 8 men, though currently housing only 3 others, all older hands who'd been with the ranch for years. They greeted him with the cautious acceptance of men accustomed to the transient nature of ranch work, neither overly friendly nor unwelcoming. That evening, Cole found himself invited to supper at the main house, apparently a tradition for new hands on their first night. The Lambert home was comfortable without being ostentatious, solid furniture, shelves lined with books, and framed drawings of horses and landscapes that Cole learned were Sophia's work. Taught herself, Elias said proudly as Cole examined a detailed sketch of the ranch house. Has an eye for detail, just like her mother. Sophia moved about the kitchen with practiced efficiency despite her limitation, serving a meal far superior to anything Cole had eaten in months. Throughout dinner, he found himself drawn into conversation about cattle markets, grazing techniques, and the challenges of ranching in Montana's harsh climate. Elias Lambert proved to be knowledgeable and pragmatic, with none of the inflated ego Cole had encountered in other ranch owners. As the meal concluded, Lambert addressed him directly. Sophia tells me you're from Texas originally. Whereabouts? Hill country, Cole replied, careful to keep his tone neutral. Near San Antonio. Good cattle country. What brought you north? Cole hesitated, aware of Sophia's attentive gaze. Family situation changed, needed a fresh start. Lambert nodded, not pressing further. Well, we're glad to have you, however temporary. Hands that know their business are hard to find this far out. Later, as Cole prepared to return to the bunkhouse, Sophia intercepted him on the porch. You didn't mention we'd met before, she said quietly. Cole glanced back toward the dining room where her father was still seated. Didn't seem relevant to the job. Perhaps not, she studied him in the fading light, but you came here because of what I showed you. It wasn't a question, but Cole answered anyway. Maybe I just needed work. There's work all over the territory. She took a step closer. You're running from something, Mr. Grayson. I just haven't figured out what yet. Some questions are better left unasked, Miss Lambert. I disagree, her eyes held his. The questions we avoid are usually the ones most worth answering. With that, she turned and made her way back inside, leaving Cole with the uncomfortable sensation that Sophia Lambert might prove more dangerous to his carefully constructed isolation than any outlaw or wild animal he'd faced in his years of wandering. The days fell into a rhythm as autumn painted the Montana landscape in golds and reds. Cole found himself settling into ranch life with surprising ease. The work was hard but satisfying, rounding up cattle from summer pastures, repairing buildings and fences before winter set in, breaking horses for next season's work. The other hands accepted him as one of their own after seeing his skill with livestock and willingness to take on the most difficult tasks without complaint. Elias Lambert proved to be exactly what Hank had promised, a fair employer who worked alongside his men and recognized ability. More surprising to Cole was how the ranch operated as something close to a family, with meals often shared between owners and hands, and genuine concern shown when one of the older workers fell ill with a fever. Most unexpected of all was Sophia's role on the ranch. Despite her physical limitation, a left leg that had never fully healed, requiring her to walk with a slight limp and occasional use of a cane, she was integral to the operation. Her bookkeeping kept the ranch finances in perfect order, her knowledge of bloodlines guided their breeding program, and her quiet authority earned respect from even the most seasoned hands. Cole found himself watching her, the careful way she mounted her specially adapted saddle, the determination in her eyes when pain clearly troubled her, the gentle patience she showed with the skittish colt she was training. She never complained, never sought special treatment, and never let her injury define what she could accomplish. 2 weeks into his stay, Cole was repairing a section of corral when Sophia approached, leading her chestnut mare. She wore a divided riding skirt and her hair was braided down her back, making her look younger than her 20 years. "Mr. Grayson," she greeted him, "I'm riding out to check the north pasture. Father asks if you'd accompany me." Cole set down his hammer. "Is there trouble expected?" "No, but there have been reports of wolves in the area. Father prefers I not ride alone." Cole suspected Elias Lambert's concern had more to do with his daughter's physical vulnerability than actual wolf danger, but he nodded. "Give me a moment to saddle my horse." They rode in companionable silence for the first mile, the autumn sun warm on their backs despite the crisp air. Sophia sat her horse with the natural grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle, her limitation barely noticeable once mounted. "You ride well," Cole observed as they crossed a shallow stream. "Thank you," Sophia smiled slightly. "After my accident, everyone thought I'd never ride again. I was determined to prove them wrong." "Seems you've made a habit of that." Her laughter was unexpected, light, and genuine. "I suppose I have. People tend to underestimate what determination can overcome." Cole studied her profile against the blue sky. "What happened, if you don't mind my asking?" Sophia was quiet for a moment. "I was helping move cattle to summer pasture. My horse stepped in a badger hole and went down hard. I was thrown into a ravine." Her voice remained steady, matter of fact. "My back was broken. The doctor said I'd never walk again." "But you proved him wrong." Eventually, her eyes met his. "It took 2 years of refusing to accept that diagnosis, 2 years of pain and small victories." She patted her mare's neck. "Riding came before walking properly, actually. Better balance on horseback." Cole felt a newfound respect bloom. That kind of determination is rare. "Not really," Sophia's gaze was knowing. "You have it too, in your own way. Though you've directed it toward running rather than staying." The observation struck uncomfortably close to truth. Sometimes running is the sensible choice. And sometimes it's just easier than facing what hurts. She urged her horse forward before he could respond. "The pasture is just ahead. We should check the water level in the creek first." The afternoon passed quickly as they inspected fences, counted cattle, and ensured the creek hadn't been dammed by beaver activity. Throughout, Sophia demonstrated a practical knowledge of ranching that matched her father's, offering insights about grazing patterns and water management that impressed even Cole's experienced eye. As they turned back toward the ranch, dark clouds began gathering over the mountains. "Weather's turning," Cole observed. "We should pick up the pace." Sophia nodded, but as they urged their horses to a trot, her mare suddenly shied at a snake crossing their path. The sudden movement unbalanced Sophia, whose adapted saddle couldn't fully compensate for her weaker left side. Cole watched in alarm as she began to slip sideways. In an instant, he was beside her, one arm catching her around the waist before she could fall. The momentum nearly pulled him from his own saddle, but he managed to steady them both, their horses dancing nervously beneath them. "I've got you," he said, his arm still supporting her as she regained her seat. Sophia's face was pale, her breathing rapid from the near fall. For a moment they remained frozen, his arm around her waist, her hand gripping his shoulder, their faces inches apart. Something shifted in Cole's chest, an unfamiliar tightness that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "Thank you," Sophia said softly, her blue eyes holding his. Cole became acutely aware of her warmth against his side, the subtle floral scent of her hair, the trust in her expression. He released her carefully, ensuring she was securely seated before creating distance between them. "We should hurry," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Storm's coming." They made it back to the ranch as the first fat raindrops began to fall, the sky darkening rapidly above them. Cole helped Sophia dismount, his hands at her waist lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. "I can see to the horses," he offered. Sophia shook her head. "We'll both be soaked if we don't hurry." "Hank can handle them," she glanced up at the threatening sky. "You should come inside until this passes." In the warm kitchen of the main house, they found themselves alone. Elias had ridden to a neighboring ranch that morning and the cook had gone to town for supplies. Cole stood awkwardly just inside the door, suddenly aware of his muddy boots and rain-dampened clothing. "You're dripping on the floor," Sophia observed with a small smile. "Take off your coat at least." Cole complied, hanging his duster on a peg by the door. Sophia moved to the stove, her limp more pronounced after the long ride. "I'll make coffee, you look half frozen." "I've weathered worse," Cole said, but he gratefully accepted the steaming cup she offered moments later. They sat at the kitchen table as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance. The unexpected intimacy of the situation, alone together in the warm kitchen while storm raged outside, created a strange bubble of isolation from the rest of the world. "You never did tell me why you decided to take the job here," Sophia said after a comfortable silence. Cole stared into his coffee cup. "Maybe I was curious." "About what?" "About the life my brother might have had." The admission surprised even him. "He wanted this, you know, a ranch of his own, a place to build something lasting." Sophia's expression softened. "And you didn't." "I never thought that far ahead." Cole set down his cup. "The way I saw it, making plans was just asking for disappointment." "Is that why you keep moving, to avoid disappointment?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "I keep moving because standing still gets you killed out here." "Does it?" Sophia challenged gently. "My father has stood his ground for 15 years, built something lasting, something meaningful." She leaned forward slightly. "There's strength in roots, Cole, not just in being able to ride away." His name on her lips startled him, the first time she'd addressed him so informally. It created a dangerous sense of connection he'd spent years avoiding. "Roots can trap you," he countered, "make you vulnerable. They can also sustain you," her eyes held his, "give you something worth fighting for." The storm intensified outside, rain hammering against the roof. Inside, something equally powerful was building between them, a connection Cole hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He stood abruptly, needing distance. Storm's not letting up. "I should get back to the bunkhouse before it gets worse." Disappointment flickered across Sophia's face before she composed her expression. "Of course, thank you for riding with me today." At the door, Cole paused, looking back at her framed in the warm light of the kitchen. "You were right about one thing, Miss Lambert." "What's that?" "I did come here because of what you showed me, that photograph. It was a reminder of everything I've been trying to forget." "And has it worked, the forgetting?" Cole's hand tightened on the doorknob. "No, but neither has running." He stepped out into the rain before she could respond, letting the cold water wash away the dangerous warmth their conversation had kindled. Some paths were not meant for men like him, men who had failed to protect those they loved, men who carried the weight of responsibility for lives lost. Better to keep moving than to risk bringing that shadow to someone else's door. Especially someone whose quiet strength and unwavering determination had begun to feel dangerously like hope. The weeks following that rainy afternoon brought changes to the Bar El Ranch as autumn deepened toward winter. Cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, hay was stored in anticipation of snow, and the rhythm of work shifted to accommodate shorter days and colder temperatures. Throughout it all, Cole found himself drawn ever more into the life of the ranch and into increasingly frequent interactions with Sophia Lambert. What began as chance encounters evolved into something more deliberate. Sophia sought his opinion on horses, invited him to help train her young colt, asked him to accompany her on necessary rides to check distant pastures. For his part, Cole found reasons to be near the main house, offering to split firewood, repairing the garden fence, delivering reports directly to her office rather than passing messages through other hands. Each interaction deepened his appreciation for her quiet competence and unwavering spirit. He learned that her artwork extended beyond the sketches decorating the house. She created detailed maps of the ranch lands that rivaled any professional cartographer's work. He discovered her voracious appetite for books, her knowledge of subjects ranging from animal husbandry to classical literature, her dry wit that emerged when she felt comfortable. And in turn, almost against his will, Cole found himself sharing pieces of his own past, stories of his brother James, memories of his mother's garden in Texas, adventures from his years on the trail. Small confidences carefully offered that nonetheless represented more personal disclosure than he'd allowed himself in years. One crisp November evening, as Cole split firewood outside the main house, Elias Lambert approached him. "Got a minute, Grayson?" Cole set down his axe. "Yes, sir." Lambert gestured toward the barn. "Walk with me." They moved in silence until they reached the quiet interior of the large barn. Lambert checked a pregnant mare before turning to face Cole directly. "You've proven yourself a good hand these past weeks," he began. "Work ethic like yours is hard to find." "Thank you, sir. Which is why I'm wondering about your plans come spring." Cole shifted uncomfortably. "I haven't given it much thought." Lambert studied him with knowing eyes. "Haven't you? Seems to me you're a man who's always planning his next move." "Force of habit, I suppose." "And a hard one to break." Lambert ran a hand along the mare's neck. "I'll be direct, Grayson. I'm offering you a permanent position. Foreman, starting next season. Current one's retiring, heading to Oregon to live with his daughter." The offer caught Cole completely off guard. "Sir, I—" "Don't answer now," Lambert interrupted. "Take time to consider. It's not just a job I'm offering, but a place, a future if you want it." His gaze sharpened. "And I think you might want it more than you're willing to admit." "What makes you say that?" Lambert's expression softened slightly. "I see how you look at this place, like a man who's finally found something worth stopping for." He paused. "And I see how you look at my daughter." Heat crawled up Cole's neck. "Mr. Lambert, I assure you." "No assurances needed. Sophia makes her own decisions." Lambert straightened. "Always has, always will. But she deserves someone who plans to stick around through more than one winter." With that, he clapped Cole on the shoulder and left him alone in the barn with thoughts more jumbled than they'd been in years. A permanent position, a future. The very things he'd convinced himself he neither wanted nor deserved. And Sophia, the unspoken implication in her father's words hung in the air that there might be possibilities beyond what Cole had allowed himself to imagine. That night, sleep eluded him. Images flickered through his mind, his brother swept away in rushing water while Cole watched helplessly from the shore, his father's body, blood staining the Texas dirt. Sophia's eyes, bright with intelligence and something that looked dangerously like affection. Past and potential future colliding, leaving him caught between the safety of continued movement and the terrifying possibility of standing still. Dawn found him already awake, his decision no clearer than it had been the night before. He moved through morning chores mechanically, his mind elsewhere until Hank approached with news that shifted his focus entirely. "Cattle are missing from the north pasture," the older man reported. "Looks like rustlers. Boss wants all hands ready to ride in 10 minutes. The seriousness of the situation crystallized Cole's thoughts immediately. Cattle rustling was more than theft, it was a direct threat to the ranch's survival, particularly with winter approaching, and rustlers were rarely reluctant to use violence if confronted. As the men gathered in the ranch yard, Elias Lambert outlined what they knew: approximately 20 head missing, tracks leading northwest toward the mountains, likely taken during the night. The plan was straightforward. Track the stolen cattle, recover them if possible, identify the rustlers for the territorial marshal. Sophia will remain here with 2 hands to guard the ranch house, Lambert concluded. The rest of us split into 2 groups to cover more ground. Cole found himself assigned to Lambert's own group, along with Hank and another experienced hand named Peterson. As they prepared to ride out, Cole noticed Sophia standing on the porch, her expression tense with worry. On impulse, he broke away from the others and approached her. "We'll find them," he said, his voice low. Sophia nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Be careful, rustlers this bold won't hesitate to fight. Your father knows what he's doing. It's not just him I'm concerned about." Her hand briefly touched his arm, the contact sending warmth through his coat despite the morning chill. "Come back safely, Cole." The simple statement carried weight far beyond its words. Cole covered her hand with his own for a brief moment. "I will." The tracking proved easier than expected. The rustlers had made little effort to hide their trail, suggesting either inexperience or confidence in their head start. By midday, Lambert's group had followed the tracks into the foothills, where dense pine forest replaced the open grassland of the ranch. "They're heading for Miller's Pass," Hank observed, studying the increasingly steep terrain ahead. Only way through these mountains for 30 miles in either direction. Lambert nodded grimly. If we push hard, we might catch them before they reach it. They urged their horses forward, following the clear trail of disturbed earth and broken branches. Cole rode slightly ahead, his years on the trail having honed his tracking skills to a fine edge. As they rounded a sharp bend in the narrow mountain path, he raised his hand, signaling the others to halt. "Fresh droppings," he said quietly, dismounting to examine the ground. "They can't be more than an hour ahead." Lambert joined him, studying the signs, 4 riders from the tracks pushing the cattle hard. His jaw tightened. "We need to close the gap before they reach the pass. Once through, they'll be harder to follow." They mounted again, increasing their pace despite the treacherous terrain. Within the hour, the distant sound of cattle reached them, the distinctive lowing of distressed animals being driven too quickly over difficult ground. Lambert signaled for them to dismount and proceed on foot. The path ahead narrowed between steep rock walls, the beginning of Miller's Pass. It was the perfect place for an ambush, but also their best chance to trap the rustlers with nowhere to retreat. "Peterson, circle wide and come in from above if you can," Lambert instructed. "Hank, stay with the horses, Grayson with me." They advanced cautiously, rifles ready. As they approached the entrance to the pass, the sounds of cattle and men grew louder. Cole caught glimpses of movement ahead, stolen Bar El cattle being herded through the narrow passage by mounted men. Lambert signaled a halt, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to get closer. If they make it through the pass, we lose our advantage." They crept forward until they had a clear view of the scene, 4 men driving the stolen cattle, just as the tracks had indicated. Cole recognized none of them, but their methods were practiced, suggesting this wasn't their first theft. Lambert raised his rifle. "I'll call them out. If they reach for weapons, we fire." Cole nodded, positioning himself behind a large boulder that offered both cover and a clear line of sight. Lambert's voice rang out, echoing against the rock walls. "This is Elias Lambert. You're driving stolen cattle bearing my brand. Throw down your weapons and surrender." The reaction was immediate. The rustlers scattered, 2 drawing pistols while the others sought cover. Gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off stone as Cole and Lambert returned fire from their protected positions. From above, Peterson began firing as well, creating a crossfire that quickly convinced 2 of the rustlers to throw down their weapons. The third was hit in the shoulder by one of Peterson's shots and surrendered immediately. But the 4th man, clearly the leader from his commands to the others, made a desperate break, riding hard through the pass. "He's getting away," Lambert shouted, already moving toward his horse. "I'll get him," Cole responded, sprinting back to where Hank waited with their mounts. He swung into the saddle and spurred his horse forward, racing into the pass. The rustler had a head start, but the stolen cattle were slowing his escape. Cole pushed his horse harder, gaining ground as the pass widened slightly. He could see the man ahead now, tall, bearded, with a distinctive red bandana around his neck. The rustler glanced back, saw Cole gaining, and made a desperate decision. Abandoning the cattle, he veered off the main trail onto a narrow deer path that climbed steeply up the mountainside. Cole followed without hesitation, though the path was barely wide enough for a horse and dropped away sharply on one side. The chase continued upward, both horses struggling on the treacherous terrain. Cole's mount was fresher, steadily closing the gap until they reached a small plateau where the path temporarily widened. Seeing his opportunity, Cole urged his horse into a final burst of speed, drawing alongside the rustler's mount. The man turned, rage contorting his features as he drew his pistol. Cole lunged from his saddle, tackling the rustler from his horse. They hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from Cole's lungs. The pistol discharged harmlessly into the air as they grappled, rolling dangerously close to the edge of the plateau. The rustler was strong, desperation lending him additional power as he fought to break free. A heavy punch caught Cole on the jaw, momentarily stunning him. The man scrambled for his fallen pistol, fingers closing around the grip as he swung it toward Cole's chest. Cole reacted instinctively, driving his boot into the rustler's wrist. The gun went flying, disappearing over the edge of the cliff. With a roar of fury, the rustler charged, his shoulder catching Cole in the midsection and driving him backward. They struggled at the very edge of the precipice, stones crumbling beneath their feet to fall hundreds of feet to the rocky ground below. Cole felt himself slipping, the rustler's weight pushing him inexorably toward the drop. In a desperate move, he hooked his leg behind the man's knee and twisted hard, reversing their positions. The rustler teetered at the edge, arms windmilling as he fought for balance. Cole reached for him, an instinctive gesture to prevent the fall, but it was too late. With a scream that echoed against the mountain walls, the man plummeted backward into empty space. Cole collapsed onto solid ground, breathing heavily as the reality of what had just happened sank in. He'd killed men before, in self-defense during his years on the trail, but never like this. Never watching a man fall to his death, even an adversary who would have gladly done the same to him. Minutes later, Lambert and Peterson found him still sitting there, staring at the empty space where the rustler had been. "Grayson," Lambert called, approaching cautiously. "Are you hurt?" Cole shook his head slowly. "He fell. I tried to grab him, but—" Lambert's hand settled on his shoulder. "It was him or you. You did what you had to do." "The cattle?" Cole asked, forcing himself to focus on practicalities. "Recovered. Other 3 rustlers tied up and ready for transport to the marshal in Silver Creek." Lambert helped him to his feet. "Let's get back to the ranch. Storm's brewing and Sophia will be worried." The mention of Sophia jolted Cole fully back to the present. He had promised to return safely, and he intended to keep that promise. Some promises, he was beginning to understand, mattered more than the fear that had kept him running for so long. They returned to the Bar El Ranch as dusk was falling, driving the recovered cattle before them and leading the horses of the captured rustlers, the men themselves bound and under guard. Sophia stood on the porch as they rode into the yard, relief washing over her face as she spotted Cole among the returning men. As the others dealt with securing prisoners and returning cattle to pasture, Cole dismounted stiffly, his body aching from the fight and the long ride. Sophia approached him, concern evident in her expression. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the bruise darkening his jaw. "Nothing serious." Cole attempted a reassuring smile, though it pulled at his split lip. Sophia was not deterred. "Come inside, those cuts need cleaning at least." Too tired to argue, Cole followed her into the house and to the kitchen, where she directed him to sit while she gathered medical supplies. The simple domesticity of the scene, her movements around the familiar space, the warmth of the stove against the gathering cold outside, struck him with unexpected force. "Your father told you what happened?" he asked as she dampened a cloth. Sophia nodded, her expression solemn. "He said you tracked the leader when he tried to escape, that there was a struggle and he fell." She gently pressed the cloth to Cole's cut cheek. "It wasn't your fault." "I've been thinking about what your father offered," Cole said abruptly, "the foreman position." Sophia's hand stilled, and "I've spent years convincing myself that staying anywhere was a mistake. That attachment was a weakness." He met her eyes directly. "I was wrong." "What changed your mind?" "Today, when we were tracking those rustlers, all I could think about was protecting this place." "Protecting," he hesitated, then continued more softly, "protecting the people who call it home." Sophia's eyes searched his. "And is that what you want, a home?" "I didn't think I deserved one. Not after I failed to save my father, my brother." The admission came easier than he'd expected. "I carried that guilt for so long it became part of me. Easier to keep moving than to risk caring about someone I might fail again." "Cole," Sophia's voice was gentle as she set aside the cloth and took his hand. "We can't protect everyone we love from every danger. That's not how life works on the frontier or anywhere else. I'm beginning to understand that." He turned his hand to clasp hers. "Today made me realize something. When that man and I were fighting on that cliff edge, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of not coming back here, not seeing you again." Color rose in Sophia's cheeks, but her gaze remained steady. "Are you saying you want to stay?" Yes, the word felt like release from guilt, from running, from the isolation he'd imposed on himself for years. "If the offer still stands." The foreman position, a smile tugged at her lips. "That too." Cole's free hand rose to gently touch her cheek. "Sophia, The kitchen door opened, interrupting whatever he might have said as Elias Lambert entered. He took in the scene before him, his daughter and Cole sitting close, hands joined, and cleared his throat. "Marshal's been sent for," he announced. "Should be here by morning to collect the prisoners." His gaze moved between them. everything all right here? Sophia smiled at her father. Coles accepted the foreman position. Lambert's weathered face broke into a satisfied smile. Good decision, Grayson, for all concerned. He glanced meaningfully at their still joined hands. I'll leave you to finish your discussion. After he departed, a moment of awkward silence fell between them. Your father seems unsurprised, Cole observed. Sophia's laughter broke the tension. My father has been watching us dance around each other for weeks. He's many things, but unobservant isn't one of them. And how do you feel about it, about me staying? Her eyes met his, utterly serious now. I think you know exactly how I feel, Cole Grayson. I've never been particularly good at hiding my feelings. Tell me anyway. His voice was barely above a whisper. I believe in you, she said simply. I have since that day you found my brother's photograph and recognized your own past staring back at you. You could have kept writing, kept running, but you didn't. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of man you are. And what kind is that? The kind who, despite his best efforts to believe otherwise, has too much heart to keep it locked away forever. She squeezed his hand. The kind I've been waiting for. Cole leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. I can't promise I won't still be haunted by the past sometimes. I'm not asking you to forget it. Only to believe that the future can hold something better. Her free hand came up to rest against his chest. Something worth building. Together, he said, the word both question and statement. Sophia's answer was to close the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like coming home after years of wandering. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing the ranch in white promise. Spring came to the Bar L Ranch in a rush of green and new beginnings. The harsh Montana winter had given way to warming days and the constant activity of calving season. Cole moved through the busy days with the confidence of a man who had found his place in the world, directing ranch operations with the same care and attention he'd once reserved solely for planning his next departure. The foreman's cabin, situated a short distance from the main house, had become truly his over the winter months, a small but comfortable home filled with evidence of his permanently settled status. Bookshelves held volumes borrowed from Sophia, walls displayed her drawings of the ranch lands, and a framed photograph, the one she had dropped that fateful day in Silver Creek, sat on his bedside table. As he saddled his horse in the early morning light, Cole reflected on how completely his life had transformed in the space of a single year. The man who had ridden into Silver Creek believing attachments were dangerous weaknesses now found himself bound by choice to this land, these people, and most especially to the remarkable woman who had seen through his carefully constructed walls. His thoughts were interrupted by the approach of hoofbeats. Sophia rode toward him on her chestnut mare, her golden hair catching the morning sun, though she still bore the physical reminder of her accident in the slight unevenness of her gait when walking. On horseback she moved with fluid grace, her adapted saddle allowing her complete freedom. "You're up early," she called as she drew near. Cole smiled, the expression coming naturally now where once it had been rare. "North pasture fence needs checking before we move the new mothers out there." "Need company?" Her blue eyes held a teasing light. "Or would another pair of eyes slow you down?" "I'd welcome the company," he replied honestly, "especially yours." Sophia's smile widened. "Let me check with father about the supply order first. I'll meet you by the creek crossing." Cole watched her ride toward the main house, warmth spreading through his chest. Their courtship over the winter months had been conducted with the blessing of Elias Lambert and the poorly concealed approval of the entire ranch staff. Quiet evenings reading by the fire, long rides across snow-covered pastures, conversations that stretched into the night, each interaction deepening the connection between them until Cole could hardly remember a time when Sophia hadn't been the center of his world. True to her word, Sophia joined him 20 minutes later at the creek crossing, a small leather satchel attached to her saddle. "Father says to check the northwest boundary while we're out," she reported as they rode side by side. The Peterson place had trouble with strays breaking through there last week. They made their way across the rolling grassland, now lush with spring growth. The work of checking fences was routine but necessary, and they fell into an easy rhythm, Cole handling the physical repairs while Sophia kept track of locations needing more extensive attention later. By midday, they had reached a high point overlooking much of the ranch lands. Below them, cattle grazed peacefully, the main buildings visible in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney of the cookhouse where lunch would be waiting for the hands. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sophia said softly, following his gaze, "even more so in spring." Cole nodded, taking in the vast landscape that had become home. "Your father built something remarkable here." "We all did," she corrected gently. "And continue to build." She turned in her saddle to face him more directly. "Which reminds me, Father and I were discussing the south parcel last night. The one with the natural spring." Cole had spent considerable time surveying that section over the winter, identifying it as ideal for expansion. Sophia nodded. "He's decided to deed it over, as a wedding present." Cole stared at her, momentarily speechless. Wedding present. A flush colored her cheeks, though her gaze remained steady. "Perhaps I'm being presumptuous, but I thought. That is, I hoped." Cole reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Sophia Lambert, are you proposing to me?" Her laughter rang out bright and clear in the spring air. "I suppose I am. Though I'd imagined it might be the other way around eventually." "Eventually?" Cole raised an eyebrow. "And if I had plans for eventually that were more immediate?" Sophia's eyes widened slightly. "Did you?" In answer, Cole swung down from his saddle and moved to help her dismount, his hands gentle at her waist. Once they stood on solid ground, he reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small object, a ring of braided gold, simple but elegant. "I've been carrying this for weeks," he admitted. "Waiting for the right moment." Sophia's breath caught. "And is this the right moment?" "Any moment with you is the right one." Cole took her hand, his expression growing serious. "Sophia, you found me when I was lost, not just physically, but in every way that matters. You showed me that there's more strength in staying than in running, more courage in loving than in isolation." He held up the ring. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears glistened in Sophia's blue eyes as she nodded. "Yes, with all my heart, yes." As Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows, he marveled at the journey that had brought him to this moment. A photograph dropped, a familiar face recognized, and the course of two lives forever altered. The wedding took place 6 weeks later on the Bar L Ranch, with the entire community of Silver Creek in attendance. Beneath an arch of spring wildflowers, with mountains as their witness, Cole Grayson and Sophia Lambert exchanged vows as the setting sun painted the landscape in gold. Elias Lambert, prouder than anyone had ever seen him, gave his daughter away with tears unashamedly tracking down his weathered cheeks. Hank Simmons stood as Cole's best man, the old cowhand having become something of a father figure to the once rootless drifter. As Cole slipped a gold band onto Sophia's finger to join her engagement ring, his voice rang clear across the assembled guests. "With this ring, I promise to build our future together, day by day, season by season. No more running, no more fear. Just us creating something lasting on this land we both love." Sophia's answering vows spoke of patience, of seeing beyond masks to the heart beneath, of believing in possibilities even when the path seemed uncertain. "You found more than a photograph that day in Silver Creek," she said, her eyes holding his. "You found your way home, and I found the partner I'd been waiting for all along." The celebration continued well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and the kind of community joy that could only exist in a place where each person's happiness was bound to all others. As darkness fell, lanterns illuminated the ranch yard, and Cole led his bride in a dance beneath the stars, his arms steady around her waist, supporting her when her strength flagged but never overshadowing her own determination. "Happy?" he asked softly as they swayed together. Sophia's answer was a smile that outshone the lanterns. "Completely, are you?" Cole looked around at the ranch that had become his home, at the people who had become his family, and finally back to the woman who had shown him that love wasn't weakness but the greatest strength of all. "More than I ever believed possible," he said truthfully, "and it all began with a photograph." "And a man brave enough to recognize what it meant," Sophia added. "Not just the face in the image, but the chance it represented." Later that night, as they stood on the porch of the foreman's cabin, now expanded and improved to become their home, Cole wrapped his arms around his wife and looked out over the moonlit landscape of the Bar El Ranch. Tomorrow would bring the usual challenges of ranch life: cattle to tend, fences to mend, a future to build. But for the first time in his adult life, Cole Grayson welcomed those challenges without reservation. The West was still wild, still dangerous at times, but he had found what so many sought on the frontier but few truly discovered: not just a place to survive, but a place to belong. A woman to love, a future to build, a life worth staying for. And it had all begun with a photograph dropped in a dusty hotel dining room and the courage to face what it revealed, not just about the past, but about all the possibilities the future might hold for a man finally ready to stop running and start living.